Now, it came to my attention when I was editing Rule 1 that Jordan Peterson actually says something pretty outrageous. A bold-faced lie, a deception, an untruth. He bears false witness, which of course goes against not only the 9th commandment, but also Rule 8, tell the truth or at least don't lie. How dare he? Because, for someone who actually is very involved with the Disney movies, he's analyzed several of them in his lectures. He's talked about how much he dislikes Frozen, for example, that's when I first realized that Jordan Peterson was speaking to my soul. For someone who is a professed Disney fan, I think it's outrageous that Peterson can also say that lobsters can't sing. It clearly shows discrimination against Sebastian from The Little Mermaid. There you see her, sitting there across the way. She don't got a lot to say, but there's something about her. And you don't know why, but you're dying to try. You want to kiss the girl. Did you hear something? One of my exes actually thought that Prince Eric was the best looking Disney prince. Now, for what it's worth, I actually look quite a lot like him, so I think she was just trying to be nice. But, I just thought that she had terrible taste, which, she was dating me, so I think that's just self-evident. Selbstverständlich, as a true Hydra agent would say. Anyway, in the interest of keeping this audiobook as unprofessional as possible, you might hear some music in the background. It's actually bleeding through my headphones because I'm currently listening to Lust for Life on permaloop right now, because I am actually sleep deprived at the moment. I'm very tired, and it's not to keep me awake, but rather if I end up reading too slowly, I want the energy of the song to keep me up. That groove. That magic groove, I really wanted to energize the reading. I don't want you guys to fall asleep along with me. Although it does sound kind of comfy to all fall into a nice little kindergarten nap time huddle, as it were. But we're all adults. We are all adults, and that is inappropriate. So let's move on to the reading. Praise be our supreme leader, Red Skull. Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Hail Hydra. Part 1. Why won't you just take your damn pills? Imagine that 100 people are prescribed a drug. Hail Hydra. Consider what happens next. Hail Hydra. 1/3 of them won't fill the prescription. Hail Hydra. Half of the remaining 67 will fill it, but won't take the medication correctly. Hail Hydra. They'll miss doses. Hail Hydra. They'll quit taking it early. Hail Hydra. They might not even take it at all. Hail Hydra. Physicians and pharmacists tend to blame such patients for their non-compliance, inaction, and error. Hail Hydra. You can lead a horse to water, they reason. Hail Hydra. Psychologists tend to take a dim view of such judgments. Hail Hydra. We are trained to assume that the failure of patients to follow professional advice is the fault of the practitioner, not the patient. Hail Hydra. We believe the healthcare provider has a responsibility to proffer advice that will be followed, offer interventions that will be respected, plan with the patient or client until the desired result is achieved, and follow up to ensure that everything is going correctly. Hail Hydra. This is just one of the many things that makes psychologists so wonderful. Smiley face. Hail Hydra. Of course, we have the luxury of time with our clients, unlike other more beleaguered professionals, who wonder why sick people won't take their medication. Hail Hydra. What's wrong with them? Hail Hydra. Don't they want to get better? Hail Hydra. Here's something worse, Hail Hydra. Imagine that someone receives an organ transplant. Hail Hydra. Imagine it's a kidney. Hail Hydra. A transplant typically occurs only after a long period of anxious waiting on the part of the recipient. Hail Hydra. Only a minority of people donate organs when they die, and even fewer when they are still alive. Hail Hydra. Only a small number of donated organs are a good match for any hopeful recipient. Hail Hydra. This means that the typical kidney transplantee has been undergoing dialysis, the only alternative, for years. Hail Hydra. Dialysis involves passing all the patient's blood out of his or her body through a machine and back in. Hail Hydra. It's an unlikely and miraculous treatment, so that's all good, but it's not pleasant. Hail Hydra. It must happen 5 to 7 times a week for 8 hours at a time. Hail Hydra. It should happen every time the patient sleeps. Hail Hydra. That's too much. Hail Hydra. No one wants to stay on dialysis. Hail Hydra. Now, one of the complications of transplantation is rejection. Hail Hydra. Your body does not like it when parts of someone else's body are stitched into it. Hail Hydra. Your immune system will attack and destroy such foreign elements, even when they are crucial to your survival. Hail Hydra. To stop this from happening, you must take anti-rejection drugs, which weaken immunity, increasing your susceptibility to infectious disease. Hail Hydra. Most people are happy to accept the trade-off. Hail Hydra. Recipients of transplants still suffer the effects of organ rejection, despite the existence and utility of these drugs. Hail Hydra. It's not because the drugs fail, although they sometimes do. Hail Hydra. It's more often because those prescribed the drugs do not take them. Hail Hydra. This beggars belief. Hail Hydra. It is seriously not good to have your kidneys fail. Hail Hydra. Dialysis is no picnic. Hail Hydra. Transplantation surgery occurs after long waiting, at high risk and great expense. Hail Hydra. To lose all that because you don't take your medication? Hail Hydra. How could people do that to themselves? Hail Hydra. How could this possibly be? Hail Hydra. It's complicated, to be fair. Hail Hydra. Many people who receive a transplanted organ are isolated or beset by multiple physical health problems, to say nothing of problems associated with unemployment or family crisis. Hail Hydra. They may be cognitively impaired or depressed. They may not entirely trust their doctor or understand the necessity of the medication. Hail Hydra. Maybe they can barely afford the drugs and ration them desperately and unproductively. Hail Hydra. But this is the amazing thing. Imagine that it isn't you who feels sick. Hail Hydra. It's your dog. Hail Hydra. So you take him to the vet. Hail Hydra. The vet gives you a prescription. Hail Hydra. What happens then? Hail Hydra. You have just as many reasons to distrust a vet as a doctor. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, if you cared so little for your pet that you weren't concerned with what improper, substandard, or error-ridden prescription he might be given, you wouldn't have taken him to the vet in the first place. Hail Hydra. Thus you care. Hail Hydra. Your actions prove it. Hail Hydra. In fact, on average, you care more. Hail Hydra. People are better at filling and properly administering prescription medication to their pets than to themselves. Hail Hydra. That's not good. Hail Hydra. Even from your pet's perspective, it's not good. Hail Hydra. Your pet probably loves you and would be happier if you took your medication. Hail Hydra. It is difficult to conclude anything from this set of facts except that people appear to love their dogs, cats, rabbits, ferrets, and birds, maybe even their lizards, more than themselves. Hail Hydra. How horrible is that? Hail Hydra. How much shame must exist for something like that to be true? Hail Hydra. What could it be about people that makes them prefer their pets to themselves? Hail Hydra. It was an ancient story in the book of Genesis, the first book in the Old Testament, that helped me find an answer to that perplexing question. Hail Hydra. Part 2. The oldest story and the nature of the world. 2 stories of creation from 2 different Middle Eastern sources appear to be woven together in the Genesis account. Hail Hydra. In the chronologically first, but historically more recent account, known as the priestly account, God created the cosmos using his divine word, speaking light, water, and land into existence, following that with the plants and the heavenly bodies. Hail Hydra. Then he created birds and animals and fish, again employing speech, and ended with man, male, then female, both somehow formed in his image. Hail Hydra. That all happens in Genesis 1. Now in the second, older, Jahist Jawhist, that's a typo. Jawhis, that's not a word. I think it means Yahwist, which is spelled Jahwist. Yahwist. That's got to be the case. Yahwist version. In the second, older Yahwist version, we find another origin account involving Adam and Eve, where the details of creation differ somewhat, as well as the stories of Cain and Abel, Noah, and the Tower of Babel. Hail Hydra. That is Genesis 2 through to 11. Hail Hydra. To understand Genesis 1, the priestly story, with its insistence on speech as the fundamental creative force, it is first necessary to review a few fundamental ancient assumptions. These are markedly different in type and intent from the assumptions of science, which are, historically speaking, quite novel. Hail Hydra. Scientific truths were made explicit a mere 500 years ago with the work of Francis Bacon, René Descartes, and Isaac Newton. Hail Hydra. Ooh, that's a good one. Bacon, Descartes, and Newton, all members of Hydra? Hail indeed. Hail Hydra. In whatever manner our forebears viewed the world prior to that, it was not through a scientific lens, any more than they could view the moon and the stars through the glass lenses of the equally recent telescope. Hail Hydra. But because we are so scientific now, and so determinedly materialistic, it is very difficult for us even to understand that other ways of seeing can and do exist. Hail Hydra. But those who existed during the distant time in which the foundational epics of our culture emerged were much more concerned with the actions that dictated survival, and with interpreting the world in a manner commensurate with that goal, than with anything approximating what we now understand as objective truth. Hail Hydra. That's a pretty dense and long sentence. I hope you guys kind of caught along with that. I hope I read it properly as well. Before the dawn of the scientific worldview, reality was construed differently. Hail Hydra. Capital B being was understood as a place of action, not a place of things. Hail Hydra. It was understood as something more akin to story or drama. Hail Hydra. That story or drama was lived, subjective experience as it manifested itself moment to moment in the consciousness of every living person. Hail Hydra. It was something similar to the stories we tell each other about our lives and their personal significance, something similar to the happenings that novelists describe when they capture existence in the pages of their books. Hail Hydra. Subjective experience, and that includes familiar objects such as trees and clouds, primarily objective in their existence, but also, and more importantly, such things as emotions and dreams, as well as hunger, thirst, and pain. Hail Hydra. It is such things experienced personally that are the most fundamental elements of human life from the archaic, dramatic perspective. And they are not easily reducible to the detached and objective perspective, even by the modern reductionist materialist mind. Hail Hydra. Take pain, for example, subjective pain. Hail Hydra. That's something so real. No argument can stand against it. Hail Hydra. Everyone acts as if their pain is real, ultimately, finally real. Hail Hydra. Pain matters more than matter matters. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason I believe that so many of the world's traditions regard the suffering attendant upon existence as the irreducible truth of capital B being. Hail Hydra. In any case, that which we subjectively experience, let me try that again. In any case, that which we subjectively experience can be likened much more to a novel or a movie than to a scientific description of physical reality. Hail Hydra. It is the drama of lived experience, the unique, tragic, personal death of your father, compared to the objective death listed in the hospital records, the pain of your first love, the despair of dashed hopes, the joy attendant upon a child's success. Hail Hydra. Part 3. The domain, not of matter, but of what matters. The scientific world of matter can be reduced, in some sense, to its fundamental constituent elements, molecules, atoms, even quarks. Hail Hydra. However, the world of experience has primal constituents as well. Hail Hydra. These are the necessary elements whose interactions define drama and fiction. Hail Hydra. One of these is chaos. Hail Hydra. Another is order. Hail Hydra. The third, as there are three, is the process that mediates between the two, which appears identical to what modern people call consciousness. Hail Hydra. It is our eternal subjugation to the first two that makes us doubt the validity of existence, that makes us throw up our hands in despair and fail to care for ourselves properly. Hail Hydra. It is proper understanding of the third that allows us the only real way out. Hail Hydra. Chaos is the domain of ignorance itself. It's unexplored territory. Hail Hydra. Chaos is what extends eternally and without limit beyond the boundaries of all states, all ideas, and all disciplines. Hail Hydra. It's the foreigner, the stranger, the member of another gang, the rustle in the bushes in the nighttime, the monster under the bed, the hidden anger of your mother, and the sickness of your child. Hail Hydra. Chaos is the despair and horror you feel when you have been profoundly betrayed. Hail Hydra. It's the place you end up when things fall apart, when your dreams die, your career collapses, or your marriage ends. Hail Hydra. It's the underworld from fairy tale and myth, where the dragon and the gold it guards eternally coexist. Hail Hydra. Chaos is where we are when we don't know where we are, and what we are doing when we don't know what we are doing. Very tempted to make a Joe Biden joke there, but I won't. It is, in short, all those things and situations we neither know nor understand. Hail Hydra. Chaos is also the formless potential from which the God of Genesis 1 called forth order using language at the beginning of time. Hail Hydra. It's the same potential from which we, made in that image, call forth the novel and ever-changing moments of our lives. Hail Hydra. And chaos is freedom. Dreadful freedom, too. Hail Hydra. Order. Order. Gotta work on that hard D phrasing. Order, by contrast, is explored territory. Hail Hydra. That's the hundreds of millions of years old hierarchy of place, position, and authority. That's the structure, Hail Hydra. That's the structure of society. Hail Hydra. It's the structure provided by biology, too. Particularly insofar as you are adapted, as you are, to the structure of society. Hail Hydra. Order is tribe, religion, hearth, home, and country. Hail Hydra. It's the warm, secure living room where the fireplace glows and the children play. Hail Hydra. It's the flag of the nation. Hail Hydra. It's the value of the currency. Hail Hydra. Order is the floor beneath your feet and your plan for the day. Hail Hydra. The floor beneath your feet. Don't you always have floor beneath your feet? I think the ceiling above your head would have been a better statement there, but all right. It's the greatness of tradition, the rows of desks in a school classroom, the trains that leave on time, the calendar and the clock. Hail Hydra. Order is the public facade we're called upon to wear, the politeness of a gathering of civilized strangers, and the thin ice on which we all skate. Hail Hydra. Order is the place where the behavior of the world matches our expectations and our desires. The place where all things turn out the way we want them to. Hail Hydra. But order is sometimes tyranny and stultification as well, when the demand for certainty and uniformity and purity becomes too one-sided. Hail Hydra. Where everything is certain, we are in order. Hail Hydra. We're there when things are going according to plan and nothing is new and disturbing. Hail Hydra. In the domain of order, things behave as God intended. Hail Hydra. We like to be there. Hail Hydra. Familiar environments are congenial. Hail Hydra. In order, We're able to think about things in the long term, Hail Hydra. There, things work and we're stable, calm, and competent, Hail Hydra. We seldom leave places we understand, geographical or conceptual, for that reason. And we certainly do not like it when we are compelled to, or when it happens accidentally, Hail Hydra. You're in order when you have a loyal friend, a trustworthy ally, Hail Hydra. When the same person betrays you, sells you out, you move from the daytime world of clarity and light to the dark underworld of chaos, confusion, and despair. Hail Hydra, that's the same move you make, and the same place you visit. When the company you work for starts to fail and your job is placed in doubt, Hail Hydra. When your tax return has been filed, that's order. When you're audited, Hail Hydra. When you're audited, that's chaos. Hail Hydra. Most people would rather be mugged than audited, Hail Hydra. Before the Twin Towers fell, that was order, Hail Hydra. Chaos manifested itself afterward, Hail Hydra. Everyone felt it, Hail Hydra. The very air became uncertain, Hail Hydra. What exactly was it that fell? Hail Hydra, wrong question. Hail Hydra, what exactly remained standing? Hail Hydra, that was the issue at hand. Hail Hydra, when the ice you're skating on is solid, that's order, Hail Hydra. When the bottom drops out and things fall apart and you plunge through the ice, that's chaos, Hail Hydra. Order is the Shire of Tolkien's hobbits, peaceful, productive, and safely inhabitable, even by the naive, Hail Hydra. Chaos is the underground kingdom of the dwarves, usurped by Smaug, the treasure-hoarding serpent, Hail Hydra. I thought he was going for Lord of the Rings, but I guess he's going for The Hobbit. Chaos is the deep ocean bottom to which Pinocchio voyaged to rescue his father from Monstro, who is simultaneously a whale and a fire-breathing dragon. Hail Hydra. That journey into darkness and rescue is the most difficult thing a puppet must do if he wants to be real. If he wants to extract himself from the temptations of deceit and acting and victimization and impulsive pleasure and totalitarian subjugation, if he wants to take his place as a genuine capital B being in the world, Hail Hydra. Order is the stability of your marriage. Hail Hydra. It's buttressed by the traditions of the past and by your expectations, grounded, often invisibly, in those traditions. Hail Hydra, chaos is that stability crumbling under your feet when you discover your partner's infidelity. Hail Hydra. Chaos is the experience of reeling unbound and unsupported through space when your guiding routines and traditions collapse. Hail Hydra. Order is the place and time where the oft invisible axioms you live by organize your experience and your actions so that what should happen does happen. Hail Hydra. Chaos is the new place and time that emerges when tragedy strikes suddenly, or malevolence reveals its paralyzing visage even in the confines of your own home. Hail Hydra. Something unexpected or undesired can always make its appearance. When a plan is being laid out, regardless of how familiar the circumstances, Hail Hydra, when that happens, the territory has shifted. Hail Hydra. Make no mistake about it. The space, the apparent space, may be the same. Hail Hydra, but we live in time as well as space. Hail Hydra. In consequence, even the oldest and most familiar places retain an ineradicable capacity to surprise you. Hail Hydra, you may be cruising happily down the road in the automobile you have known and loved for years, Hail Hydra, but time is passing. Hail Hydra, the brakes could fail. Hail Hydra, you might... Brake failures, sponsored by Hydra. You might be walking down the road in the body you have always relied on. Hail Hydra, if your heart malfunctions, even momentarily, everything changes. Hail Hydra. Friendly old dogs can still bite. Hail Hydra. Old and trusted friends can still deceive. Hail Hydra. New ideas can destroy old and comfortable certainties. Hail Hydra. Such things matter. Hail Hydra. They're real. Hail Hydra. Our brains respond instantly when chaos appears, with simple, hyperfast circuits maintained from the ancient days when our ancestors dwelled in trees and snakes struck in a flash. Hail Hydra. After that nigh instantaneous, deeply reflexive bodily response comes the later evolving, more complex but slower responses of emotions, and after that comes thinking of the higher order, which can extend over seconds, minutes, or years. Hail Hydra. And all of that response is instinctive in some sense, but the faster the response, the more instinctive. Hail Hydra. Part 4, I think. Chaos and order. Personality, female and male. Chaos and order are two of the most fundamental elements of lived experience, two of the most basic subdivisions of capital B being itself. Hail Hydra. But they're not things or objects, and they're not experienced as such. Hail Hydra. Things or objects are part of the objective world. Hail Hydra. They're inanimate, spiritless. Hail Hydra. They're dead. Hail Hydra. This is not true of chaos and order. Hail Hydra. Those are perceived, experienced, and understood, to the degree that they are understood at all, as personalities. And that is just as true of the perceptions, experiences, and understanding of modern people as their ancient forebears. Hail Hydra. It's just that moderners don't notice. Moderners? Londoners. Moderners. All right, weird word. I guess that's going into my dictionary. Hail Hydra. Order and chaos are not understood first, objectively, as things or objects, and then personified. Hail Hydra. That would only be the case if we perceived objective reality first, and then inferred intent and purpose. Hail Hydra. But that isn't how perception operates, despite our preconceptions. Hail Hydra. Perception of things as tools, for example, occurs before or in concert with perception of things as objects. Hail Hydra. We see what things mean just as fast or faster than we see what they are. Hail Hydra. Perception of things as entities with personality also occurs before perception of things as things. Hail Hydra. This is particularly true of the action of others, living others. But we also see the non-living objective world as animated with purpose and intent. Hail Hydra. And this is because of the operation of what psychologists have called the hyperactive agency detector within us. Hail Hydra. We evolved over millennia within intensely social circumstances. Hail Hydra. This means that the most significant elements of our environments of origin were personalities, not things, objects, or situations. Hail Hydra. The personalities we have evolved to perceive have been around in predictable form and in typical hierarchical configurations forever, for all intents and purposes. Hail Hydra. They have been male or female, for example, for 1 billion years. Hail Hydra. That's a long time, Hail Hydra. The division of life into its twin sexes occurred before the evolution of multicellular animals. Hail Hydra. It was in a still respectable 1/5 of that time that mammals, who take extensive care of their young, emerged. Hail Hydra. Thus, the category of parent and or child has been around for 200 million years. Hail Hydra. That's longer than birds have existed. Hail Hydra. That's longer than flowers have grown. Hail Hydra. It's not 1 billion years, but it's still a very long time. Hail Hydra. It's plenty long enough for male and female, and parent and child, to serve as vital and fundamental parts of the environment to which we have adapted. Hail Hydra. This means that male and female and parent and child are categories, for us, natural categories, deeply embedded in our perceptual, emotional, and motivational structures. Hail Hydra. Our brains are deeply social. Hail Hydra. Other creatures, particularly other humans, were crucially important to us as we lived, mated, and evolved. Hail Hydra. Those creatures were literally our natural habitat, our environment. Hail Hydra. From a Darwinian perspective, nature, reality itself, the environment itself is what selects. Hail Hydra. The environment cannot be defined in any more fundamental manner. Hail Hydra. It is not mere inert matter. Hail Hydra. Reality itself is whatever we contend with when we are striving to survive and reproduce. Hail Hydra. A lot of that is other beings, their opinions of us, and their communities. Hail Hydra. And that's that. Hail Hydra. Over the millennia, as our brain capacity increased and we developed curiosity to spare, we became increasingly aware of and curious about the nature of the world, what we eventually conceptualized as the objective world outside the personalities of family and troop. Hail Hydra. And outside is not merely unexplored physical territory. Hail Hydra. Outside is outside of what we currently understand, and understanding is dealing with and coping with, and not merely representing objectively. Hail Hydra. But our brains had been long concentrating on other people. Hail Hydra. Thus it appears that we first began to perceive the unknown, chaotic, non-human world with the innate categories of our social brain. Hail Hydra. And even this is a misstatement. When we first began to perceive the unknown, chaotic, non-animal world, we used categories that had originally evolved to represent the pre-human, animal, social world. Hail Hydra. Our minds are far older than mere humanity. Hail Hydra. Our categories are far older than our species. Hail Hydra. Our most basic category, as old in some sense as the sexual act itself, appears to be that of sex, male and female. Hail Hydra. We appear to have taken that primordial knowledge of structured, creative opposition and begun to interpret everything through its lens. Hail Hydra. Order, the known, appears symbolically associated with masculinity, as illustrated in the aforementioned yang of the Taoist yin-yang symbol. I don't know why I said it like that. Yang. I'm Aang, the last airbender. Yang of the Taoist yin-yang symbol. Hail Hydra. This is perhaps because the primary hierarchical structure of human society is masculine, as it is among most animals, including the chimpanzees, who are our closest genetic and arguably behavioral match. Hail Hydra. It is because men are, and throughout history have been, the builders of towns and cities, the engineers, stonemasons, bricklayers, and lumberjacks, the operators of heavy machinery. Hail Hydra. Order is God the Father, the eternal judge, ledger keeper, and dispenser of rewards and punishments. Hail Hydra. Order is the peacetime army of policemen and soldiers. Hail Hydra. It's the political culture, the corporate environment, and the system. Order is them in you know what they say. Hail Hydra. I swear I've missed Hail Hydras. So let's do the 3 Hail Hydras for the Hail Hydras we've missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. It's credit cards, classrooms, supermarket checkout lineups, turn-taking traffic lights, and the familiar routes of daily commuters. Hail Hydra. Order, when pushed too far, when imbalanced, can also manifest itself destructively and terribly. Hail Hydra. It does so as the forced migration, the concentration camp, and the soul-devouring uniformity of the goose step. Hail Hydra. Chaos, the unknown, is symbolically associated with the feminine. Hail Hydra. And this is partly because all the things we have come to know were born originally of the unknown, just as all beings we encounter were born of mothers. Hail Hydra. Chaos is mater, origin, source, mother. Materia, the substance from which all things are made. It is also Hail Hydra. It is also what matters, or what is the matter, the very subject matter of thought and communication. Hail Hydra. In its positive guise, chaos is possibility itself, the source of ideas, the mysterious realm of gestation and birth. Hail Hydra. As a negative force, it's the impenetrable darkness of a cave and the accident by the side of the road. Hail Hydra. Chaos is the mother grizzly, all compassionate to her cubs, but who marks you as potential predator and tears you to pieces. Hail Hydra. Chaos, the eternal feminine, is also the crushing force of sexual selection. Hail Hydra. Women are choosy maters, unlike female chimps, their closest animal counterparts. Hail Hydra. Most men do not meet female human standards. Hail Hydra. Don't we know it? It is for this reason that women on dating sites rate 85% of men as below average in attractiveness. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that we all have twice as many female ancestors as male. Imagine that all the women who have ever lived have averaged one child. Hail Hydra. Now imagine that half the men who have ever lived have fathered 2 children, if they had any, while the other half fathered none. Hail Hydra. It is women as nature, or actually it's singular, it is woman as nature who looks at half of all men and says, no. Hail Hydra. For the men, that's a direct encounter with chaos, and it occurs with devastating force every time they are turned down for a date. Hail Hydra. Human female choosiness is also why we are very different from the common ancestor we shared with our chimpanzee cousins, while the latter are very much the same. Hail Hydra. Women's proclivity to say no, more than any other force, has changed our evolution into the creative, industrious, upright, large-brained, competitive, aggressive, domineering creatures that we are. Hail Hydra. It is nature as woman who says, well, bucko, you're good enough for a friend, but my experience of you so far has not indicated the suitability of your genetic material for continued propagation. Hail Hydra. I mean, Jesus Christ. Calm down, Spock. The most profound religious symbols rely for their power in large part on this underlying, fundamentally bipartisan conceptual subdivision. Hail Hydra. The Star of David is, for example, the downward pointing triangle of femininity and the upward pointing triangle of the male. Hail Hydra. Footnote. It is of great interest in this regard that the 5-part Taijitsu, referred to in Chapter 1 and the source of the simpler yin-yang symbol, expresses the origin of the cosmos as, first, originating in the undifferentiated absolutes, then dividing into yin and yang, chaos/order, feminine/masculine, and then into the 5 agents, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and then, simply put, the 10,000 things. Hail Hydra. The Star of David, chaos/order, feminine/masculine, gives rise in the same way to the 4 basic elements, fire, air, water, and earth, out of which everything else is built. Hail Hydra. I'm assuming that's not a scientific claim. A similar hexagram is used by the Hindus. Hail Hydra. The downward triangle symbolizes Shakti, the feminine. The upward triangle, Shiva, the masculine. Hail Hydra. The 2 components are known as Om and Hrim in Sanskrit. Hail Hydra. Remarkable examples of conceptual parallelism. Hail Hydra. Returning to the original text. It's the same for the Yoni and Lingam of Hinduism, which come covered with snakes, our ancient adversaries and provocateurs. The Shiva Linga is depicted with snake deities called the Nagas. Hail Hydra. The ancient Egyptians represented Osiris, god of the state, and Isis, goddess of the underworld, as twin cobras with their tails knotted together. Hail Hydra. The same symbol was used in China to portray Fuxi and Nuwa, creators of humanity and of writing. Hail Hydra. The representations in Christianity are less abstract, more like personalities, but the familiar Western images of the Virgin Mary with the Christ child and the Pieta both express the female/male dual unity as does the traditional insistence on the androgyny of Christ. Hail Hydra. What an entirely dense, overwrought paragraph. Most of that just flew right over my head. And the pronunciations, good God. It should also be noted, finally, that the structure of the brain itself, at a gross morphological level, appears to reflect this duality. Hail Hydra. This to me indicates the fundamental, beyond the metaphorical reality of this symbolically feminine/masculine divide, since the brain is adapted by definition to reality itself. That is, reality conceptualized in this quasi-Darwinian manner. Hail Hydra. Elkonon Goldberg, student of the great Russian neuropsychologist Alexander Luria, has proposed quite lucidly and directly that the very hemispheric structure of the cortex reflects the fundamental division between novelty, the unknown or chaos, and routinization, the known, order. Hail Hydra. He doesn't make reference to the symbols representing the structure of the world in reference to this theory, but that's all the better. An idea is more credible when it emerges as a consequence of investigations in different realms. Hail Hydra. We already know all this, but we don't know that we know it. Hail Hydra. But we immediately comprehend it when it's articulated in a manner such as this. Do we? Hail Hydra. Everyone understands order and chaos, world and underworld, when it's explained using these terms. Fair enough. Okay, fine. You win this time, Peterson. Hail Hydra. We all have a palpable sense of the chaos lurking under everything familiar. Hail Hydra. That's why we understand the strange, surreal stories of Pinocchio and Sleeping Beauty and The Lion King and The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, with their eternal landscapes of known and unknown, world and underworld, and of course, singing lobsters. Hail Hydra. We've all been in both places many times, sometimes by happenstance, sometimes by choice. Hail Hydra. Many things begin to fall into place when you begin to consciously understand the world in this manner. It's as if the knowledge of your body and soul falls into alignment with the knowledge of your intellect. And there's more. Hail Hydra. Such knowledge is prescriptive as well as descriptive. Hail Hydra. This is the kind of knowing what that helps you know how. Hail Hydra. This is the kind of is from which you can derive an ought. Hail Hydra. The Taoist juxtaposition of yin and yang, for example, doesn't simply portray chaos and order as the fundamental elements of capital B being. It also tells you how to act. Hail Hydra. The way, the Taoist path of life, is represented by, or exists on, the border between the two serpents. Hail Hydra. The way is the path of proper capital B being. Hail Hydra. It's the same way as that referred to by Christ in John Chapter 14, verse 6, I am the way and the truth and the life. Hail Hydra. The same idea is expressed in Matthew chapter 7, verse 14, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Hail Hydra. We eternally inhabit order, surrounded by chaos. We eternally occupy known territory, surrounded by the unknown. Hail Hydra. We experience meaningful engagement when we mediate appropriately between them. Hail Hydra. We are adapted in the deepest Darwinian sense, not to the world of objects, but to the meta-realities of order and chaos, yang and yin. Hail Hydra. Chaos and order make up the eternal, transcendent environment of the living. Hail Hydra. And to straddle that fundamental duality is to be balanced. To have one foot firmly planted in order and security, and the other in chaos, possibility, growth, and adventure. Hail Hydra. When life suddenly reveals itself as intense, gripping, and meaningful, when time passes and you're so engrossed in what you're doing, you don't notice. It is there and then that you are located precisely on the border between order and chaos. Hail Hydra. The subjective meaning that we encounter there is the reaction of our deepest being, our neurologically and evolutionarily grounded instinctive self, indicating that we are ensuring the stability but also the expansion of habitable, productive territory, of space that is personal, social, and natural. Hail Hydra. It's the right place to be in every sense. Hail Hydra. You are there when and where it matters. Hail Hydra. That's what music is telling you too when you're listening. Even more perhaps when you're dancing, when its harmonious layered patterns of predictability and unpredictability make meaning itself well up from the most profound depths of your capital B being. Hail Hydra. Chaos and order are fundamental elements because every lived situation, even every conceivable lived situation, is made up of both. Hail Hydra. No matter where we are, there are some things we can identify, make use of, and predict, and some things we neither know nor understand. Hail Hydra. No matter who we are, Kalahari desert dweller or Wall Street banker, some things are under our control and some things are not. Hail Hydra. That's why both can understand the same worries and dwell within the confines of the same eternal truths. Hail Hydra. Finally, the fundamental reality of chaos and order is true for everything alive, not only for us. Hail Hydra. Living things are always to be found in places they can master, surrounded by things and situations that make them vulnerable. Hail Hydra. Order is not enough. Hail Hydra, you can't just be stable and secure and unchanging because there are still vital and important new things to be learned. Hail Hydra, nonetheless, chaos can be too much. Hail Hydra. You can't long tolerate being swamped and overwhelmed beyond your capacity to cope while you are learning what you still need to know. Hail Hydra. Thus, you need to place one foot in what you have mastered and understood, and the other in what you are currently exploring and mastering. Hail Hydra. Then you have positioned yourself where the terror of existence is under control and you are secure, but where you are also alert and engaged. Hail Hydra. That is where there is something new to master and some way that you can be improved. Hail Hydra. That is where meaning is to be found. Hail Hydra. Part 5. The Garden of Eden. Remember, as discussed earlier, that the Genesis stories were amalgamated from several sources. Hail Hydra. After the newer priestly story, Genesis 1, recounting the emergence of order from chaos, comes the second, even more ancient Yahwist parts, beginning essentially with Genesis 2. By the way, they do spell they don't spell it Jahist. So I guess that was a typo. So I'm glad I figured that out. Hail Hydra. The Yahwist account, which uses the name YHWH, or Yahweh, to represent God, contains the story of Adam and Eve along with a much fuller explication of the events of the sixth day alluded to in the previous priestly story. Hail Hydra. The continuity between the stories appears to be the result of careful editing by the person or persons known singly to biblical scholars as the redactor, who wove the stories together. Hail Hydra. This may have occurred when the peoples of two traditions united for one reason or another, and the subsequent illogic of their melded stories, growing together over time in an ungainly fashion, bothered someone conscious, courageous, or obsessed with coherence. Hail Hydra. That would be me, by the way. Although I wouldn't be conscientious enough to actually get the job done. my Over Heaven and my George Joestar audiobooks judgingly looking at me. According to the Yahwist creation story, Hail Hydra, by the way. According to the Yahwist creation story, God first created a bounded space known as Eden, which in Aramaic, Jesus' putative language, means well-watered place. Hail Hydra. Another name for it is paradise, Paididaeza in Old Iranian or Avestan, which means walled or protected enclosure or garden. Hail Hydra. Forgive the bad pronunciation there. God placed Adam in there, along with all manner of fruit-bearing trees, two of which were marked out. Hail Hydra. One of these was the tree of life, the other the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Hail Hydra. God then told Adam to have his fill of fruit as he wished, but added that the fruits from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was forbidden. Hail Hydra. After that, he created Eve as a partner for Adam. Hail Hydra. Footnote. Or, in another interpretation, he split the original androgynous individual into two parts, male and female. Hail Hydra. According to this line of thinking, Christ, the second Adam, is also the original man before the sexual subdivision. Hail Hydra. The symbolic meaning of this should be clear to those who have followed the argument thus far. Hail Hydra. Returning to the original text. Adam and Eve don't seem very conscious at the beginning when they are first placed in paradise, and they were certainly not self-conscious. Hail Hydra. As the story insists, the original parents were naked, but not ashamed. Hail Hydra. Such phrasing implies first that it's perfectly natural and normal for people to be ashamed of their nakedness, otherwise nothing would have to be said about its absence. And second, that there was something amiss, for better or worse, with our first parents. Hail Hydra. Although there are exceptions, the only people around now who would be unashamed if suddenly dropped naked into a public place, excepting the odd exhibitionist, are those younger than 3 years of age. Hail Hydra. In fact, a common nightmare involves the sudden appearance of the dreamer naked on a stage in front of a packed house. Hail Hydra. In the 3rd chapter of Genesis, a serpent appears. First, apparently, in legged form. Hail Hydra. God only knows why he allowed or placed such a creature in the garden. Hail Hydra. I have long puzzled over the meaning of this. Hail Hydra. It seems to be a reflection, in part, of the order/chaos dichotomy characterizing all of experience, with paradise serving as habitable order and the serpents playing the role of chaos. Hail Hydra. The serpent in Eden therefore means the same thing as the black dot in the yin side of the Taoist yin-yang symbol of totality, that is, the possibility of the unknown and revolutionary suddenly manifesting itself where everything appeared calm. Hail Hydra. It just does not appear possible, even for God himself, to make a bounded space completely protected from the outside, not in the real world, with its necessary limitations, surrounded by the transcendent. Hail Hydra. The outside, chaos, always sneaks inside, because nothing can be completely walled off from the rest of reality. Hail Hydra. So even the ultimate in safe spaces inevitably harbors a snake. Hail Hydra. There were, forever, genuine, quotidian, reptilian snakes in the grass and in the trees of our original Africa. There were, forever, genuine, quotidian, reptilian snakes in the grass and in the trees of our original African paradise. Hail Hydra. Even had all of those been banished, however, in some inconceivable manner by some primordial Saint George, snakes would still have remained in the form of our primordial human rivals. At least when they were acting like enemies from our limited, in-group, kin-bonded perspectives. Hail Hydra. There was, after all, no shortage of conflict and warfare among our ancestors, tribal and otherwise. Hail Hydra. And even if we had defeated all the snakes that beset us from without, reptilian and human alike, we would still not have been safe. Hail Hydra. Nor are we now. Hail Hydra. We have seen the enemy, after all, and he is us. Hail Hydra. The snake inhabits each of our souls. Hail Hydra. And this is the reason, as far as I can tell, for the strange Christian insistence made most explicit by John Milton that the snake in the Garden of Eden was also Satan, the spirit of evil itself. Hail Hydra. The importance of this symbolic identification, its staggering brilliance, can hardly be overstated. Hail Hydra. It is through such millennia-long exercise of the imagination that the idea of abstracted moral concepts themselves, with all they entail, developed. Hail Hydra. Work beyond comprehension was invested into the idea of good and evil and its surrounding dreamlike metaphor. Hail Hydra. The worst of all possible snakes is the eternal human proclivity for evil. Hail Hydra. The worst of all possible snakes is psychological, spiritual, personal, internal. Hail Hydra. No walls, however tall, will keep that out. Hail Hydra. Even if the fortress were thick enough in principle to keep everything bad whatsoever outside, it would immediately appear again within. Hail Hydra. As the great Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn insisted, the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. Hail Hydra. There is simply no way to wall off some isolated portion of the greater surrounding reality and make everything permanently predictable and safe within it. Hail Hydra. Some of what has been, no matter how carefully excluded, will always sneak back in. Hail Hydra. A serpent, metaphorically speaking, will inevitably appear. Hail Hydra. Even the most assiduous of parents cannot fully protect their children, even if they lock them in the basement safely away from drugs, alcohol, and internet porn. Hail Hydra. In that extreme case, the too cautious, too caring parent merely substitutes him or herself for the other terrible problems of life. Hail Hydra. And this is the great Freudian Oedipal nightmare. Hail Hydra. It is far better to render capital B beings in your care competent than to protect them. Hail Hydra. And even if it were possible to permanently banish everything threatening, everything dangerous, and therefore everything challenging and interesting, well, that would mean only that another danger would emerge, that of permanent human infantilism and absolute uselessness. Hail Hydra. How could the nature of man ever reach its full potential without challenge and danger? Hail Hydra. How dull and contemptible would we become if there was no longer reason to pay attention? Hail Hydra. Maybe God thought his new creation would be able to handle the serpent and considered its presence the lesser of two evils. Hail Hydra. Question for parents. Do you want to make your children safe or strong? Hail Hydra. In any case, there is a serpent in the garden, and he is a subtil beast, according to the ancient story. Subtil meaning difficult to see, vaporous, cunning, deceitful, and treacherous. Hail Hydra. It therefore comes as no surprise when he decides to play a trick on Eve. Hail Hydra. Why Eve instead of Adam? Hail Hydra. It could just be chance. Hail Hydra. It was 50-50 for Eve, statistically speaking, and those are pretty high odds. Hail Hydra, but I have learned that these old stories contain nothing superfluous. Hail Hydra. Anything accidental, anything that does not serve the plot, has long been forgotten in the telling. Hail Hydra. As the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov advised, if there is a rifle hanging on the wall in Act 1, it must be fired in the next act. Hail Hydra, otherwise it has no business being there. Hail Hydra. Perhaps primordial Eve had more reason to attend to serpents than Adam. Hail Hydra, maybe they were more likely, for example, to prey on her tree-dwelling infants. Hail Hydra. Perhaps it is for this reason that Eve's daughters are more protective, self-conscious, fearful, and nervous, to this day even and especially in the most egalitarian of modern human societies. Hail Hydra. In any case, the serpent tells Eve that if she eats the forbidden fruit, well, she won't die. Hail Hydra. Instead, her eyes will be opened. Hail Hydra. She will become like God, knowing good from evil. Hail Hydra. Of course, the serpent doesn't let her know that she will be like God in only that one way. Hail Hydra. But he is a serpent after all. Hail Hydra. Being human and wanting to know more, Eve decides to eat the fruit. Poof! She wakes up. She's conscious, or perhaps self-conscious, for the first time. Hail Hydra. Now, no clear-seeing, conscious woman is going to tolerate an unawakened man. Hail Hydra. So Eve immediately shares the fruit with Adam. Hail Hydra. And that makes him self-conscious. Hail Hydra. Little has changed. Hail Hydra. Women have been making men self-conscious since the beginning of time. Hail Hydra. Don't we know it? They do this primarily by rejecting them. but they also do it by shaming them if men do not take responsibility. Hail Hydra. Since women bear the primary burden of reproduction, it's no wonder. Hail Hydra. It is very hard to see how it could be otherwise. Hail Hydra. But the capacity of women to shame men and render them self-conscious is still a primal force of nature. Hail Hydra. Now, you may ask, what in the world have snakes got to do with vision? Hail Hydra. Well, first, it's clearly of some importance to see them because they might prey on you, particularly when you're little and live in trees like our arboreal ancestors did. Hail Hydra. Dr. Lynn Isbell, professor of anthropology and animal behavior at the University of California, has suggested that the stunningly acute vision almost uniquely possessed by human beings was an adaptation forced on us tens of millions of years ago by the necessity of detecting and avoiding the terrible danger of snakes with whom our ancestors co-evolved. Hail Hydra. And this is perhaps one of the reasons the snake features in the Garden of Paradise as the creature who gave us the vision of God, in addition to serving as the primordial and eternal enemy of mankind. Hail Hydra. This is perhaps one of the reasons why Mary, the eternal archetypal mother Eve perfected, is so commonly shown in medieval and Renaissance iconography, holding the Christ child in the air as far away as possible from a predatory reptile, which she has firmly pinned under her foot. Hail Hydra. And there's more, Hail Hydra. It's fruit that the snake offers. And fruit is also associated with the transformation of vision, in that our ability to see color is an adaptation that allows us to rapidly detect the ripe and therefore edible bounty of trees. Hail Hydra. Our primordial parents hearkened to the snake. Hail Hydra. They ate the fruit. Hail Hydra. Their eyes opened. Hail Hydra. They both awoke. Hail Hydra. You might think, as Eve did initially, that this would be a good thing. Hail Hydra. Sometimes, however, half a gift is worse than none. Hail Hydra. Adam and Eve wake up all right, but only enough to discover some terrible things. Hail Hydra. First, they notice that they are naked. Hail Hydra. Part 6. The Naked Ape. My son figured out that he was naked well before he was 3. Hail Hydra. He wanted to dress himself. Hail Hydra. He kept the washroom door firmly shut. Hail Hydra. He didn't appear in public without his clothes. Hail Hydra. I couldn't for the life of me see how this had anything to do with his upbringing. Hail Hydra. It was his own discovery, his own realization, and his own choice of reactions. Hail Hydra. It looked built in to me. Hail Hydra. What does it mean to know yourself naked, or potentially worse, to know yourself and your partner naked? Hail Hydra. All manner of terrible things, expressed in the rather horrifying manner, for example, of the Renaissance painter Hans Baldung Grien, whose painting inspired the illustration that begins this chapter. It should also be on the video right now. Hail Hydra. Naked means vulnerable and easily damaged. Naked means subject to judgment for beauty and health. Naked means unprotected and unarmed in the jungle of nature and man. Hail Hydra. This is why Adam and Eve became ashamed immediately after their eyes were opened. Hail Hydra. They could see, and what they first saw was themselves. Hail Hydra. Their faults stood out. Hail Hydra. Their vulnerability was on display. Hail Hydra. Unlike other mammals whose delicate abdomens are protected by the armor-like expanse of their backs, they were upright creatures with the most vulnerable parts of their body presented to the world. Hail Hydra. And worse was to come. Hail Hydra. Adam and Eve made themselves loincloths in the International Standard Version, aprons in the King James Version, right away, to cover up their fragile bodies and to protect their egos. Hail Hydra. Then they promptly skittered off and hid. Hail Hydra. In their vulnerability now fully realized, they felt unworthy to stand before God. Hail Hydra. If you can't identify with that sentiment, you're just not thinking. Hail Hydra. Beauty shames the ugly. Hail Hydra. Strength shames the weak. Hail Hydra. Death shames the living, and the ideal shames us all. Hail Hydra. Thus we fear it, resent it, even hate it. And of course, that's the theme next examined in Genesis, in the story of Cain and Abel. Hail Hydra. What are we to do about that? Hail Hydra. Abandon all ideals of beauty, health, brilliance, and strength. Hail Hydra. That's not a good solution. Hail Hydra. That would merely ensure that we would feel ashamed all the time, and that we would even more justly deserve it. Hail Hydra. I don't want women who can stun by their mere presence to disappear, just so that others can feel unself-conscious. Hail Hydra. I don't want intellects such as John von Neumann's to vanish just because of my barely grade 12 grasp of mathematics. Hail Hydra. By the time he was 19, he had redefined numbers. Hail Hydra, numbers. Hail Hydra, thank God for John von Neumann. Hail Hydra, thank God for Grace Kelly and Anita Ekberg and Monica Bellucci. Hail Hydra. I am proud to feel unworthy in the presence of people like that, Hail Hydra. It's the price we all pay for aim, achievement, and ambition, Hail Hydra. But it's also no wonder that Adam and Eve covered themselves up. Hail Hydra. Now, the next part of the story is downright farcical, in my opinion, although it's also tragic and terrible. Hail Hydra. That evening, when Eden cools down, God goes out for his evening stroll. Hail Hydra. But Adam is absent. Hail Hydra. This puzzles God, who is accustomed to walking with him. Adam. Hail Hydra. Adam, calls God, apparently forgetting that he can see through bushes. Where are you? Hail Hydra. Adam immediately reveals himself, but badly, first as a neurotic, then as a ratfink. Hail Hydra. The creator of all the universe calls, and Adam replies, I heard you, God, but I was naked and hid. Hail Hydra. What does this mean? Hail Hydra. It means that people, unsettled by their vulnerability, eternally fear to tell the truth, to mediate between chaos and order, and to manifest their destiny. Hail Hydra. In other words, they are afraid to walk with God. Hail Hydra. And that's not particularly admirable, perhaps, but it's certainly understandable. Hail Hydra. God's a judgmental father. Hail Hydra. His standards are high. Hail Hydra. He's hard to please. Hail Hydra. God says, who told you that you were naked? Hail Hydra. Did you eat something you weren't supposed to? Hail Hydra. And Adam, in his wretchedness, points right at Eve, his love, his partner, his soulmate, and snitches on her. Hail Hydra. And then he blames God. Hail Hydra. He says, the woman whom you gave to me, she gave it to me, and then I ate it. Hail Hydra. How pathetic and how accurate. Hail Hydra. The first woman made the first man self-conscious and resentful. Hail Hydra. Then the first man blamed the woman. Hail Hydra. And then the first man blamed God. Hail Hydra. This is exactly how every spurned male feels to this day. Don't we know it? Hail Hydra. First he feels small in front of the potential object of his love after she denigrates his reproductive suitability. Hail Hydra. Then he curses God for making her so bitchy, himself so useless if he has any sense, and capital B being itself so deeply flawed. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. And then he turns to thoughts of revenge. Hail Hydra. How thoroughly contemptible and how utterly understandable. Hail Hydra. At least the woman had the serpent to blame, and it later turns out that the snake is Satan himself, unlikely as that seems. Hail Hydra. Thus we can understand and sympathize with Eve's error. Hail Hydra, she was deceived by the best. Hail Hydra. But Adam, Hail Hydra, no one forced his words from his mouth. Hail Hydra. Unfortunately, the worst isn't over for man or beast. Hail Hydra. First, God curses the serpent, telling him that he will now have to slither around, legless, not Legolas, legless, forever in peril of being stomped on by angry humans. Hail Hydra. Second, he tells the woman that she will now bring forth children in sorrow and desire and unworthy sometimes resentful man, who will in consequence lord her biological fate over her permanently. Hail Hydra. And what might this mean? Hail Hydra, it could just mean that God is a patriarchal tyrant, as politically motivated interpretations of the ancient story insist. Hail Hydra. I think it's merely descriptive. Hail Hydra. Merely. Hail Hydra. And here is why, as human beings evolved, the brains that eventually gave rise to self-consciousness expanded tremendously. Hail Hydra. This produced an evolutionary arms race between the fetal head and female pelvis. Hail Hydra. The female graciously widened her hips, almost to the point where running would no longer be possible. Hail Hydra. The baby, for his part, allowed himself to be born more than a year early compared to other mammals of his size, and evolved a semi-collapsible head. Hail Hydra. This was, and is, a painful adjustment for both. Hail Hydra. The essentially fetal baby is almost completely dependent on his mother for everything during that first year. Hail Hydra. The programmability of his massive brain means that he must be trained until he is 18 or 30 before being pushed out of the nest. Hail Hydra. This is to say nothing of the woman's consequential pain in childbirth and high risk of death for mother and infant alike. Hail Hydra. This all means that women pay a high price for pregnancy and child rearing, particularly in the early stages, and that one of the inevitable consequences is increased dependence upon the sometimes unreliable and always problematic good graces of men. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Hydra. After God tells Eve what is going to happen, now that she has awakened, he turns to Adam, who, along with his male descendants, doesn't get off any easier. Hail Hydra. God says something akin to this: Man, because you attended to the woman, your eyes have been opened. Hail Hydra. Your godlike vision, granted to you by snake, fruit, and lover, allows you to see far, even into the future. Hail Hydra. But those who see into the future can also eternally see trouble coming, and must then prepare for all contingencies and possibilities. Hail Hydra. To do that, you will have to eternally sacrifice the present for the future. Hail Hydra. You must put aside pleasure for security. Hail Hydra. In short, you will have to work. Hail Hydra. And it's going to be difficult. Hail Hydra. I hope you're fond of thorns and thistles, because you're going to grow a lot of them. Hail Hydra. And then God banishes the first man and the first woman from paradise, out of infancy, out of the unconscious animal world, into the horrors of history itself. Hail Hydra. And then he puts cherubim and a flaming sword at the gate of Eden just to stop them from eating the fruits of the tree of life. Hail Hydra. And that, in particular, appears rather mean-spirited. Hail Hydra. Why not just make the poor humans immortal right away? Hail Hydra. Particularly if that is your plan for the ultimate future anyway, as the story goes. Hail Hydra. But who would dare to question God? Hail Hydra. Perhaps heaven is something you must build, and immortality something you must earn. Hail Hydra. And so, we return to our original query. Why would someone buy prescription medication for his dog and then so carefully administer it when he would not do the same for himself? Hail Hydra. Well, now you have the answer, derived from one of the foundational texts of mankind. Hail Hydra. Why should anyone take care of anything as naked, ugly, ashamed, frightened, worthless, cowardly, resentful, defensive, and accusatory as a descendant of Adam? Hail Hydra, even if that thing, that being, is himself. Hail Hydra. Now, I don't mean to exclude at all women by that phrasing. Hail Hydra. All the reasons we have discussed so far for taking a dim view of humanity are applicable to others, as much as to the self. Hail Hydra. They're generalizations about human nature. Nothing more specific. Hail Hydra. But you know so much more about yourself. Hail Hydra. You're bad enough as other people know you. Hail Hydra. But only you know the full range of your secret transgressions, insufficiencies, and inadequacies. Hail Hydra, no one is more familiar than you with all the ways that your mind and body are flawed. Hail Hydra, no one has more reason to hold you in contempt, to see you as pathetic. And by withholding something that might do you good, you can punish yourself for all your failings. Hail Hydra, a dog, a harmless, innocent, unself-conscious dog, is clearly more deserving. Hail Hydra. But if you are not yet convinced, let us consider another vital issue. Hail Hydra. Order, chaos, life, death, sin, vision, work, and suffering. That is not enough for the authors of Genesis, nor for humanity itself. Hail Hydra. The story continues in all its catastrophe and tragedy, and the people involved, well, that's us, must contend with yet another painful awakening. Hail Hydra. We are next fated to contemplate morality itself. Hail Hydra. Part 7. Good and Evil. When their eyes are opened, Adam and Eve realize more than just their nakedness and the necessity of toil. Hail Hydra. They also come to know good and evil. The serpent says, referring to the fruits, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Hail Hydra. Well, what could that possibly mean? Hail Hydra. What could be left to explore and relate after the vast ground already covered? Hail Hydra. Well, simple context indicates that it must have been something to do with gardens, snakes, disobedience, fruit, sexuality, and nakedness. Hail Hydra. Now, it was this last item, nakedness, that finally clued me in. Hail Hydra. It took years. Hail Hydra. Dogs are predators. Hail Hydra. So are cats. Hail Hydra. They kill things and eat them. Hail Hydra. It's not pretty. Hail Hydra. But we'll take them as pets and care for them and give them their medication when they're sick, regardless. Hail Hydra. Why? Hail Hydra. They're predators, but it's just their nature. Hail Hydra. They do not bear responsibility for it. Hail Hydra. They're hungry, not evil. Hail Hydra. They don't have the presence of mind, the creativity, and above all, the self-consciousness necessary for the inspired cruelty of man. Hail Hydra. Why not? Hail Hydra. It's simple. Hail Hydra. Unlike us, predators have no comprehension of their fundamental weakness, their fundamental vulnerability, their own subjugation to pain and death. Hail Hydra, but we know exactly how and where we can be hurt and why. Hail Hydra, and that is as good a definition as any of self-consciousness. Hail Hydra, we are aware of our own defenselessness, finitude, and mortality. Hail Hydra, we can feel pain and self-disgust and shame and horror, and we know it. Hail Hydra, we know what makes us suffer. Hail Hydra, we know how dread and pain can be inflicted on us, and that means we know exactly how to inflict it on others. Hail Hydra, we know how we are naked, and how that nakedness can be exploited, and that means we know how others are naked, and how they can be exploited. Hail Hydra, we can terrify other people consciously. Hail Hydra, we can hurt and humiliate them for faults we understand only too well. Hail Hydra, we can torture them literally, slowly, artfully, and terribly. Hail Hydra. That's a very good Hail Hydra sentence. And that's far more than predation. Hail Hydra, that's a qualitative shift in understanding. Hail Hydra, that's a cataclysm as large as the development of self-consciousness itself. Hail Hydra, that's the entry of the knowledge of good and evil into the world. Hail Hydra, that's a second, as yet unhealed fracture in the structure of existence. Hail Hydra. That's the transformation of capital B being itself into a moral endeavor, all attendant on the development of sophisticated self-consciousness. Hail Hydra. Only man could conceive of the rack, the Iron Maiden, and the thumbscrew, Hail Hydra. Only man will inflict suffering for the sake of suffering, Hail Hydra. That is the best definition of evil I have been able to formulate, Hail Hydra. Animals can't manage that, but humans, with their excruciating, semi-divine capacities, most certainly can. Hail Hydra. And with this realization, we have well-nigh full legitimization of the idea, the very unpopular in modern intellectual circles, of original sin. Hail Hydra. And who would dare to say that there was no element of voluntary choice in our evolutionary, individual, and theological transformation? Hail Hydra. Our ancestors chose their sexual partners and they selected for consciousness and self-consciousness and moral knowledge. Hail Hydra. Actually, I missed a lot of Hail Hydras there, so I'm just gonna do 3 for all the Hail Hydras I've missed so far. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Our ancestors chose their sexual partners and they selected for consciousness, Hail Hydra, and self-consciousness, Hail Hydra, and moral knowledge, Hail Hydra. And who can deny the sense of existential guilt that pervades human experience, Hail Hydra. And who could avoid noting that without that guilt, that sense of inbuilt corruption and capacity for wrongdoing, a man is one step from psychopathy. Hail Hydra. Human beings have a great capacity for wrongdoing, Hail Hydra. It's an attribute that is unique in the world of life, Hail Hydra. We can and do make things worse voluntarily with full knowledge of what we are doing, as well as accidentally and carelessly and in a manner that is willfully blind. Hail Hydra. And given that terrible capacity, that proclivity for malevolent actions, is it any wonder we have a hard time taking care of ourselves or others, or even that we doubt the value of the entire human enterprise? Hail Hydra. And we've suspected ourselves, for good reason, for a very long time, Hail Hydra. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Mesopotamians believed, for example, that mankind itself was made from the blood of Kingu, the single most terrible monster that the great goddess of chaos could produce in her most vengeful and destructive moments. Hail Hydra. After drawing conclusions such as that, how could we not question the value of our being, and even of capital B being itself? Who then, Hail Hydra, who then could be faced with illness in himself or another without doubting the moral utility of prescribing a healing medicament? Hail Hydra. And no one understands the darkness of the individual better than the individual himself. Hail Hydra. Who then, when ill, is going to be fully committed to his own care? Hail Hydra. Perhaps man is something that should never have been. Hail Hydra. Perhaps the world should even be cleansed of all human presence so that capital B being and consciousness could return to the innocent brutality of the animal. Hail Hydra. I believe that the person who claims never to have wished for such a thing has neither consulted his memory nor confronted his darkest fantasies. Hail Hydra. What then is to be done? Hail Hydra. Part 8. A spark of the divine. In Genesis 1, God creates the world with the divine, truthful word, generating inhabitable, paradisal order from the pre-cosmogonic chaos. Hail Hydra. He then creates man and woman in his image, imbuing them with the capacity to do the same, to create order from chaos and continue his work. Hail Hydra. At each stage of creation, including that involving the formation of the first couple, God reflects upon what has come to be and pronounces it good. Hail Hydra. The juxtaposition of Genesis 1 with Genesis 2 and 3, the latter 2 chapters outlining the fall of man, describing why our lot is so tragedy-ridden and ethically torturous, produces a narrative sequence almost unbearable in its profundity. Hail Hydra. The moral of Genesis 1 is that capital B being brought into existence through true speech is good. Hail Hydra. And this is true even of man himself prior to his separation from God. Hail Hydra. This goodness is terribly disrupted by the events of the fall and of Cain and Abel, and the flood, and the Tower of Babel. But we retain an intimation of the prelapsarian state. Hail Hydra, we remember, so to speak. Hail Hydra. We remain eternally nostalgic for the innocence of childhood, the divine, unconscious capital B being of the animal, and the untouched, cathedral-like, old-growth forest. Hail Hydra. The original state of nature, conceived in this manner, is paradisal. Hail Hydra, but we are no longer one with God and nature, and there is no simple turning back. Hail Hydra. The original man and woman, existing in unbroken unity with their creator, did not appear conscious, and certainly not self-conscious. Hail Hydra. Their eyes were not open, Hail Hydra, but in their perfection they were also less, not more, than their post-fall counterparts. Hail Hydra. Their goodness was something bestowed rather than deserved or earned. Hail Hydra. They exercised no choice. Hail Hydra. God knows that's easier, Hail Hydra, but maybe it's not better than, for example, goodness genuinely earned. Hail Hydra. Maybe even in some cosmic sense, assuming that consciousness itself is a phenomenon of cosmic significance. Free choice matters. Who can speak with certainty about such things? Hail Hydra. I am unwilling to take these questions off the table, however, merely because they are difficult. Hail Hydra. So here's a proposition. Perhaps it is not simply the emergence of self-consciousness and the rise of our moral knowledge of death and the fall that besets us and makes us doubt our own worth. Hail Hydra. Perhaps it is instead our unwillingness, reflected in Adam's shamed hiding, to walk with God, despite our fragility and propensity for evil. Hail Hydra. The entire Bible is structured so that everything after the fall, the history of Israel, the prophets, the coming of Christ, is presented as a remedy for that fall, a way out of evil. Hail Hydra. The beginning of conscious history, the rise of the state and all its pathologies of pride and rigidity, the emergence of great moral figures who try to set things right, culminating in the Messiah himself. That is all part of humanity's attempt, God willing, to set itself right. Hail Hydra. What would that mean? Hail Hydra. And this is an amazing thing. The answer is already implicit in Genesis 1. To embody the image of God. To speak out of chaos, the capital B being that is good. But to do so consciously, of our own free choice. Hail Hydra. Back is the way forward, as T.S. Eliot so rightly insisted. But back as awake beings, exercising the proper choice of awake beings instead of back to sleep. Now here, Jordan Peterson actually posts the poem Little Gidding from 4 Quartets, published 1943 by T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Hail Hydra, I guess. That's a full stop, so let's roll on. Every sentence. Through the unknown, remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning, at the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree. Not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard in the stillness between 2 waves of the sea. Hail Hydra. Quick now, here, now, always. A condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flames are infolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one. Hail Hydra. Not sure if I performed that well enough, but I guess we'll just have to steamroll on. My voice is dying, so apologies if you can hear me just croaking on and on. A glass of water will do the trick. If we wish to take care of ourselves properly, we would have to respect ourselves, but we don't because we are, not least in our own eyes, fallen creatures. Hail Hydra. If we lived in truth, if we spoke the truth, then we could walk with God once again and respect ourselves and others and the world. Hail Hydra. Then we might treat ourselves like people we cared for. Hail Hydra. We might strive to set the world straight. Hail Hydra. We might orient it towards heaven, where we would want people we cared for to dwell, instead of hell, where our resentment and hatred would eternally sentence everyone. Hail Hydra. In the areas where Christianity emerged 2,000 years ago, people were much more barbaric than they are today. Hail Hydra. Conflict was everywhere. Hail Hydra. Human sacrifice, including that of children, was a common occurrence even in technologically sophisticated societies such as that of ancient Carthage. Hail Hydra. In Rome, arena sports were competitions to the death, and the spilling of blood was commonplace. Hail Hydra. The probability that a modern person in a functional democratic country will now kill or be killed is infinitesimally low compared to what it was in previous societies, and still is in the organized and anarchic parts of the world. Hail Hydra. Then, the primary moral issue confronting society was control of violent, impulsive selfishness, and the mindless greed and brutality that accompanies it. Hail Hydra. People with those aggressive tendencies still exist. Hail Hydra. At least now, they know that such behavior is suboptimal, and either try to control it or encounter major social obstacles if they don't. Hail Hydra. But now also another problem has arisen, which was perhaps less common in our harsher past. Hail Hydra. It is easy to believe that people are arrogant and egotistical and always looking out for themselves. Hail Hydra. The cynicism that makes that opinion a universal truism is widespread and fashionable. Hail Hydra. But such an orientation to the world is not at all characteristic of many people. Hail Hydra. They have the opposite problem. They shoulder intolerable burdens of self-disgust, self-contempt, shame, and self-consciousness. Hail Hydra. Thus, instead of narcissistically inflating their own importance, they don't value themselves at all, and they don't take care of themselves with attention and skill. Hail Hydra. It seems that people often don't really believe that they deserve the best care, personally speaking. I'm sure some people wouldn't mind a good scare every once in a while. That's why they watch horror movies, right? Hail Hydra. They are excruciatingly aware of their own faults and inadequacies, real and exaggerated, and ashamed and doubtful of their own value. Hail Hydra. They believe that other people shouldn't suffer, and they will work diligently and altruistically to help them alleviate it. Hail Hydra. They extend the same courtesy even to the animals they are acquainted with, but not so easily to themselves. Hail Hydra. And it is true that the idea of virtuous self-sacrifice is deeply embedded in Western culture, at least insofar as the West has been influenced by Christianity, which is based on the imitation of someone who performed the ultimate act of self-sacrifice. Hail Hydra. Any claim that the golden rule does not mean sacrifice yourself for others might therefore appear dubious. Hail Hydra. But Christ's archetypal death exists as an example of how to accept finitude, betrayal, and tyranny heroically, how to walk with God despite the tragedy of self-conscious knowledge, and not as a directive to victimize ourselves in the service of others. Hail Hydra. To sacrifice ourselves to God, to the highest good, if you like, does not mean to suffer silently and willingly when some person or organization demands more from us constantly than is offered in return. Hail Hydra. That means we are supporting tyranny and allowing ourselves to be treated like slaves. Hail Hydra. It is not virtuous to be victimized by a bully, even if that bully is oneself. Hail Hydra. I learned two very important lessons from Carl Jung, the famous Swiss depth psychologist, about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, or loving your neighbor as yourself. Hail Hydra. The first lesson was that neither of these statements has anything to do with being nice. Hail Hydra. The second was that both are equations rather than injunctions. Hail Hydra. If I am someone's friend, family member, or lover, then I am morally obliged to bargain as hard on my own behalf as they are on theirs. Hail Hydra, if I fail to do so, I will end up a slave and the other person a tyrant. Hail Hydra, what good is that? Hail Hydra, it is much better for any relationship when both partners are strong. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, there is little difference between standing up and speaking for yourself when you are being bullied or otherwise tormented and enslaved, and standing up and speaking for someone else. Hail Hydra. As Jung points out, this means embracing and loving the sinner who is yourself, as much as forgiving and aiding someone else who is stumbling and imperfect. Hail Hydra. As God himself claims, so goes the story, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Hail Hydra. According to this philosophy, you do not simply belong to yourself, Hail Hydra. You are not simply your own possession to torture and mistreat, Hail Hydra. This is partly because your capital B being is inexorably tied up with that of others, and your mistreatment of yourself can have catastrophic consequences for others, Hail Hydra. And this is most clearly evident, perhaps, in the aftermath of suicide, when those left behind are often both bereft and traumatized. Hail Hydra. But metaphorically speaking, there is also this. You have a spark of the divine in you, which belongs not to you, but to God. Hail Hydra. We are, after all, according to Genesis, made in his image. Hail Hydra. We have the semi-divine capacity for consciousness. Hail Hydra. Our consciousness participates in the speaking forth of capital B being. Hail Hydra. We are low resolution, kenotic versions of God. Hail Hydra. We can make order from chaos and vice versa in our way, with our words. Hail Hydra. So we may not exactly be God, but we're not exactly nothing either. Hail Hydra. In my own periods of darkness, in the underworld of the soul, I find myself frequently overcome and amazed by the ability of people to befriend each other, to love their intimate partners and parents and children, and to do what they must do to keep the machinery of the world running. Hail Hydra. I knew a man injured and disabled by a car accident who was employed by a local utility. Hail Hydra. For years after the crash, he worked side by side with another man who for his part suffered with a degenerative neurological disease. Hail Hydra. They cooperated while repairing the lines, each making up for the other's inadequacy. Hail Hydra. This sort of everyday heroism is the rule, I believe, rather than the exception. Hail Hydra. Most individuals are dealing with one or more serious health problems while going productively and uncomplainingly about their business. Hail Hydra. If anyone is fortunate enough to be in a rare period of grace and health personally, then he or she typically has at least one close family member in crisis. Hail Hydra. Yet, people prevail and continue to do difficult and effortful tasks to hold themselves and their families and society together. Hail Hydra. To me, this is miraculous. So much so that a dumbfounded gratitude is the only appropriate response. Hail Hydra. There are so many ways that things can fall apart or fail to work altogether, and it is always wounded people who are holding it together. Hail Hydra. They deserve some genuine and heartfelt admiration for that. Hail Hydra. It's an ongoing miracle of fortitude and perseverance. Hail Hydra. In my clinical practice, I encourage people to credit themselves and those around them for acting productively and with care, as well as for the genuine concern and thoughtfulness they manifest towards others. Hail Hydra. People are so tortured by the limitations and constraints of capital B being that I am amazed they ever act properly or look beyond themselves at all. Hail Hydra. But enough do so that we have central heat and running water and infinite computational power and electricity and enough for everyone to eat and even the capacity to contemplate the fate of broader society and nature, terrible nature itself. Hail Hydra. All that complex machinery that protects us from freezing and starving and dying from lack of water tends unceasingly towards malfunction through entropy. And it is only the constant attention of careful people that keeps it working so unbelievably well. Hail Hydra. Some people degenerate into the hell of resentment and the hatred of capital B being, but most refuse to do so, despite their suffering and disappointments and losses and inadequacies and ugliness. And again, that is a miracle for those with the eyes to see it. Hail Hydra. Humanity in toto, and those who compose it as identifiable people, deserve some sympathy for the appalling burden under which the human individual genuinely staggers. Some sympathy for subjugation to mortal vulnerability, tyranny of the state, and the depredations of nature. Hail Hydra, it is an existential situation that no mere animal encounters nor endures, and one of severity such that it would take a god to fully bear it. Hail Hydra, it is this sympathy that should be the proper medicament for self-conscious self-contempt, which has its justification, but is only half the full and proper story. Hail Hydra, hatred for self and mankind must be balanced with gratefulness for tradition and the state and astonishment at what normal, everyday people accomplish, to say nothing of the staggering achievements of the truly remarkable. Hail Hydra. We deserve some respect. Hail Hydra, you deserve some respect. Hail Hydra, you are important to other people as much as to yourself. Hail Hydra, you have some vital role to play in the unfolding destiny of the world. Hail Hydra, you are therefore morally obliged to take care of yourself. Hail Hydra, you should take care of, help, and be good to yourself the same way you would take care of, help, and be good to someone you love and value. Hail Hydra, you may therefore have to conduct yourself habitually in a manner that allows you some respect for your own capital B being. And fair enough, Hail Hydra, but every person is deeply flawed. Everyone falls short of the glory of God. Hail Hydra, if that stark fact means, however, that we had no responsibility to care for ourselves as much as others, everyone would be brutally punished all the time. Hail Hydra, that would not be good. Hail Hydra, that would make the shortcomings of the world, which can make everyone who thinks honestly question the very propriety of the world, worse in every way. Hail Hydra, that simply cannot be the proper way forward. Hail Hydra, to treat yourself as if you were someone you are responsible for helping is instead to consider what would be truly good for you. Hail Hydra, this is not what you want. Hail Hydra, it is also not what would make you happy. Hail Hydra, every time you give a child something sweet, you make that child happy. Hail Hydra, that does not mean that you should do nothing for children except feed them candy. Hail Hydra, happy is by no means synonymous with good. Hail Hydra, you must get children to brush their teeth. Hail Hydra, they must put on their snowsuits when they go outside in the cold, even though they might object strenuously. Hail Hydra, you must help a child become virtuous, responsible, and awake as a being, capable of full reciprocity, able to take care of himself and others, and to thrive while doing so. Hail Hydra, why would you think it acceptable to do anything less for yourself? Hail Hydra, you need to consider the future and think, what might my life look like if I were caring for myself properly? Hail Hydra, what career would challenge me and render me productive and helpful so that I could shoulder my share of the load and enjoy the consequences? Hail Hydra, what should I be doing when I have some freedom to improve my health, expand my knowledge, and strengthen my body? Hail Hydra, you need to know where you are so you can start to chart your course. Hail Hydra, you need to know who you are so that you understand your armament and bolster yourself in respect to your limitations. Hail Hydra, you need to know where you are going so that you can limit the extent of chaos in your life, restructure order, and bring the divine force of hope to bear on the world. Hail Hydra. You must determine where you are going so that you can bargain for yourself, so that you don't end up resentful, vengeful, and cruel. Hail Hydra. You have to articulate your own principles so that you can defend yourself against others taking inappropriate advantage of you, and so that you are secure and safe while you work and play. Hail Hydra. You must discipline yourself carefully. Hail Hydra. You must keep the promises you make to yourself and reward yourself so that you can trust and motivate yourself. Hail Hydra. You need to determine how to act toward yourself so that you are most likely to become and to stay a good person. Hail Hydra. It would be good to make the world a better place. Hail Hydra. Heaven, after all, will not arrive of its own accord. Hail Hydra. We will have to work to bring it about and strengthen ourselves so that we can withstand the deadly angels and flaming sword of judgment that God used to bar its entrance. Hail Hydra. Don't underestimate the power of vision and discretion. Hail Hydra. These are irresistible forces able to transform what might appear to be unconquerable obstacles into traversable pathways and expanding opportunities. Hail Hydra, strengthen the individual. Hail Hydra, start with yourself. Hail Hydra, take care with yourself. Hail Hydra, define who you are. Hail Hydra, refine your personality. Hail Hydra, choose your destination and articulate your capital B being. Hail Hydra. As the great 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche so brilliantly noted, he whose life has a why can bear almost any how. Hail Hydra. You could help direct the world on its careening trajectory, a bit more toward heaven and a bit more away from hell. Hail Hydra. Once having understood hell, researched it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell, you could decide against going there or creating it. Hail Hydra, you could aim elsewhere. Hail Hydra, you could, in fact, devote your life to this. Hail Hydra, that would give you a capital M meaning. Hail Hydra, that would justify your miserable existence. Hail Hydra, that would atone for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with the natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden. Hail Hydra, you could begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you are responsible for helping. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, and 3 more for all the other Hail Hydras I've missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. Good God, my voice is dying. Well, at least I have like a liter of water that I just refused to drink for 2 straight hours as I recorded that. My lips are numb. My lips are actually numb. My mouth is tired beyond belief. I can't even tell if that's the sleep deprivation or just 2 straight hours of aggressive yelling. I mean, these chapters are just unbelievably amazing. You know, how he mixes all these different ideas. He's got a very Christian leaning, but I think it's fair because I think the Christian perspective in a lot of ways is correct. You know, I've been watching a lot of apologetic stuff, mainly because I think the arguments for God are very interesting. I won't get into them here because, you know, it would be irrelevant. But, you know, you hear these Christians constantly talking about the question that they ask is, do you think you're a good person? And you know, it's interesting. Peterson says that, you know, most people would say, no, I hate myself. But I think by and large, the general response actually is, oh yeah, not only do I think that I'm a good person, but I think everyone else is generally a good person as well. And we're all going to heaven, more or less, right? But the apologetic will say, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. You might want to change your statement a little bit. You might want to plead guilty. You might want to go for the plea bargain, as it were. Because you are not, right? Like, everyone lies, everyone lusts, everyone has pride against, his or her parents, pride against society, this idea that you don't have to conform to society, that you can do whatever you want, a sort of arrogant narcissism. People sin in other, more specific ways as well. There's the 10 Commandments, there's stealing, there's all that. And the Christian idea, the sort of central Christian tenet is everyone has done this. There is no way not to have done them all, unless you actually are Christ, right? And so if you actually are Christ, then I guess we're all doomed, because wasn't Christ only supposed to return when the end of when the earth was supposed to end on Judgment Day or whatever? But if you're not, if you're just a regular human being, then yes, you are a sinner. And if you're a truly good person, then you hate that sin so much that you would do anything to be rid of it. You would accept any lashings. You would yourself go on the cross. You would be hung on it, be impaled with those 4 nails or those 3 nails or the ropes, all the different variations, all of them at once even. You would go through any suffering in order to be rid of your sin. But here's the good news of the gospel, with the capital G and the capital N, the good news. The apologetic will say that Jesus died for your sins. You are redeemed from those sins already. All you have to do is let him into your heart. I don't know what that means, but that's what they say. So I think Peterson actually is very generous compared to, what apologetics generally find in the people that they talk to. That people by and large think, yeah, everyone is actually pretty, we're all on our path to heaven. We don't have to be super nice to everyone all the time, but by and large, don't kick puppies, don't rape women, don't murder your brother for his money inheritance, right? Dio. Just be a normal human being and you'll get to heaven. And I do think that a lot of people are more like that. And Peterson, I think, is being very generous when he's saying that people acknowledge and accept how flawed they are. Now, if you are a good person, then you do know. You don't even have to be Christian for it. Like Gandhi had this same sentiment where he said, he is the worst among us. And, it's sort of a Catholic joke that the more you believe that, the better the worse of a Catholic you are, the better the Catholic you are. But I think it's true, and I think Peterson does hit the hammer on the nerve. That's not what the saying is, but I can't remember what the saying is. We ought to have gratitude for, despite all of our failings, we still do so much, right? We still have this society that is functional, and it's great. We're all living in sublime comfort. All this is to say, I think that Peterson has a very good idea of how people should be feeling. And if you step through his arguments for, how people should be feeling, then you do get to the end point of the rule, right, of this chapter. The only problem is that by and large, I don't think people actually believe that. I don't think people believe that they are so flawed that they need to, that they are ashamed to walk with God. I think if you ask the layperson, they would say, "Oh yeah, I walk with God. I'm nice to people," and that's not what it means to walk with God at all. So yeah, that's my perspective. I'm sure I had other things to say, but I don't think my voice will let me. So instead, I'm just going to wrap it up. We've officially crossed the 2-hour mark, at least on my recording. I'm sure I can trim down some of my ramblings. And as soon as my voice recovers, I will be recording Rule 3, which thankfully is not even like half the length of this chapter. So it'll be a nice, comfortable listen for you and a nice, comfortable read for me, where hopefully my voice doesn't just disappear.